The estimated profits for illegal wildlife trade is about $20 billion a year.
If an animal is legal to buy in one country but illegal in another, you can very easily buy it legally and then transport it back to your home. And what is that animal then? Is it legal or is it illegal?
Wildlife crime and trade is actually the fourth largest form of organized crime globally, right behind human trafficking, drug trafficking, and weapons trafficking. In addition, the EU is a major hub for transportation of these animals, either as a destination or as a transient destination as well. So coming from South America to the EU and then all the way to China. However that trade takes place, it will often pass through the EU.
Legally, within the European Union, you're actually allowed to buy and keep any animal. Different member states have different rules and regulations, but within the EU, there are some countries that don't have any rules whatsoever about what you can keep. You are allowed to keep very rare animals, you're allowed to keep dangerous animals, CITES listed species animals, which are endangered species. We still have pet shops that allow selling of live, wild animals very often. Not only that, the majority of wild animals are traded online, in large online platforms. Another place you can buy wild animals is in live animal pet markets. Now these live animal pet markets have huge numbers of animals in there, huge numbers of different species, and the conditions that these animals are sold in are absolutely appalling. Most of the animals are sold, they're kept all day in very hot conditions in tiny little boxes, and the animals are unable to move. And we have very little understanding of what happens to those animals after the day of the show.
Criminals are going to prioritize whatever methods they can use to hide the contraband that they're bringing in between countries. And so the welfare of those animals is going to be of the least concern. They're going to be packed in with other animals that maybe are a natural predator to them. In the wild, this can cause a lot of stress, anxiety. Many animals die in transit and never make it to the destination country. So there's really a lot of welfare concerns when the animals are traded illegally.
And when people see these animal species available in a pet shop or in online adverts on social media and in these live pet markets, the natural response is, well, if it's allowed to be sold, it must be okay. And what we need to demonstrate to people watching is that just because it's allowed does not make it okay. The laws have not caught up with the actual issue on this.
Given the scale of the trade and the fact that we don't really have numbers, we don't know how many animals are actually being affected by this trade, it's very urgent. We do know from conversations with different police organizations such as Europol and Interpol that the trade in non-CITES species is increasing because of course it's much easier to make a profit and trade in something that's not illegal, that no one's looking for. And so because of that, we do know that the numbers are rising. We see it more and more, we just don't have more concrete numbers. So it's really important that we pass legislation so that we understand the data, we know where the trade is coming from, and we can stop it. And one way that we envision that taking place is through criminalizing all illegally sourced wildlife that's being traded into the EU. So these are animals that their country of origin, where they're from, that country has already banned the export of this animal. They're trying to protect it. However, for whatever reason, the animal has actually made it out of that country and now into the EU legally because we don't have any laws right now that prohibit that import of the animal.
So what we need is a harmonized rule for all of the EU that makes that much more difficult to happen. A positive list is not only legally possible, but also has added value not just for animal welfare, but also for the existing regulations that are already in place. For example, the invasive alien species regulation, or the wildlife trade regulations, or the animal health law. They'll all be improved in terms of enforcement when you have a much smaller number of species in trade.
I would say the best thing that a consumer can do is to be educated in what they're purchasing, be aware of what animals they may be buying or engaging with, and to also be educated in their voting patterns. Be aware of what laws could be passed, what laws we're proposing, for instance, and be aware of what your representatives are willing to support in the next election.